Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of The Mistake Zone, your weekly dose of our lives and the mistakes within them. My name is Jaren Wade. Joining me, as always, one of my best friends in the whole wide world, the Fist of the North Star, Matt Alba. Hey, Matt.
Yo.
How are you doing?
That's me, the North Star.
Also joining us this week, another one of my best friends in the whole wide world, West Side Fun, Rakush. Hey, Rakush.
Oh, man, that's great. That is great. You know what? Thank you, Jared.
So it seems like you were doing good this week, too.
Yes, I'm doing better once you call me West Side Fun. So much better.
And finally, also joining us for another week, my fellow South Midnighter, or Julian, what was the group in the Fallout 3 vault? Was it the Southside Serpents, or am I misremembering?
No, I think they were just the
Tunnel
Tunnel Snakes. Yeah, that was it.
Right. Southside Serpents.
And they rule, by the way.
Oh, man. Julian, how are you doing?
No, doing good.
I think, was the Southside Serpents a Riverdale thing? I don't know. I forget where all of these, 50s inspired gangs with leather jackets are coming from, coming from right now. But this is the Mistake Zone. Once again, we're back for another week to talk about the mistakes and our adventures we have encountered this week, because it is an audio journal. And once again, boys, I need to write another journal entry and subject you guys to listen to it, because this week was Record Store Day. This happened last Saturday. For those that don't know, Record Store Day is usually just a celebration of music to really entice you to go to your local record store, music store. And there are tons of mostly exclusive releases that are printed, just various limited quantities with special packaging, special vinyl pressing. And this year, my partner and I, we were both in a position to go, hey, should we go line up for a record store drop or a Record Store Day release at one of our local record stores? And it really brought me back to those days, boys, when we would go to midnight launches for video games or wait in line for Boxing Day. And this year we went around, the store opened around 8 a.m. and we started lining up. We lined up at 6 a.m. so 2 hours prior, and then we were also pretty, not necessarily super deep in line, but maybe I wanted to say 30-ish, where it's that uncomfortable area where, depending on how many records the store was allocated, we might not get what we wanted. So we started lining up at 6 a.m. and someone lined up behind us, and we just started talking just to kind of keep ourselves busy for the next 2 hours. And before I get to my record haul, because this is a consumerism podcast, boys, when you, as people in their mid-30s, when you meet someone new, what's your current, procedure about going about potentially keeping in touch with said person? Rakush, as also someone who might meet new people for their job or whatever, what's your procedure about, hey, this person's cool, how should I potentially stay in touch with this person?
The answer to that typically depends on how drunk I am when I'm talking to them, because the alcohol gives me the courage to continue talking to them on a later date. Otherwise, I'll just be like awkward and be like, well, nice talking to you, I'll see you later, and that's it. I don't really make new connections nowadays.
How about you, Matt? How's your connection protocol?
I don't think I have made a new meaningful connection with somebody since 2018.
I feel that, Matt. Not no new friends. No new friends. Julian, as someone who is definitely more social than I am, how's your connection protocol?
I definitely am not more social, I don't think. I unfortunately am really bad at it, though. I think most of the connections I've made is through because as a teacher that's kind of like traveled and taught in different places, like you'd make kind of connections with other teachers and stuff, and then it's unfortunately kind of similar to like graduating when you leave the school and you kind of promise like, oh, we'll keep in touch, but then you don't keep in touch.
Classic.
Yeah. So I mean, I gotta say that's probably mostly my fault because my partner Ashley, like, she is still very much close to a lot of the teacher friends we've made, but I guess I'm just a weird recluse, so that's where I am.
So also no new friends, Julian.
Yeah, like, yeah. I mean, some, but nothing as like crazy.
Jaren, let's be honest. If we were making new friends, we're not doing this podcast.
Fair enough. Big fair. So we're standing in line, we're chopping it up, and the guy behind us, coincidentally enough, named Matt, really cool guy, similar taste in music, eclectic taste in music, similar to us. And he was also, we were talking about retro games and how he recently started replaying Majora's Mask, and we talked about how much the Switch 2 was and how we were all priced out of it. Typical, normal, well-adjusted adult conversation. And by the time our purchases were complete, it was that thought process in my mind of, oh, what's the protocol here? Hence why I asked you guys. Like, I'm not asking someone for their number. I don't use Facebook. And it should have occurred to me where if we're talking about video games, maybe asking for the Discord addy, but that completely slipped my mind at this point. So shout out to Matt, shout out to our Matt, and then shout out to Line Matt, who we were able to converse with to spend 2 hours with. But this is a audio journal, and boys, I know you probably don't want to hear it. Maybe Rakush wants to hear it, but
I absolutely want to hear it. And I'm assuming you're talking about your haul.
Yes, Record Store Day 2025. Of course, my partner and I avid vinyl collectors, so we were mostly there just to see what limited releases we can get. In terms of my partner, she ended picking up Laffy's A Night at the Symphony Hollywood Bowl, live performance record, really fun. The new Wallows More EP, Charlie XCX, The Guest featuring Billie Eilish 7-inch single. Boys, we also picked up, say what you will about Post Malone, because sometimes he seems like a chill dude. Most of the time I see his social content, but then he'll like have one or two remarks that kind of make me raise an eyebrow. But we picked up his tribute to Nirvana, and as someone who has a fondness for Nirvana, I thought this was a pretty good tribute album. The selection of what he covered, I was actually really surprised with some of my favorite songs. Rakush, are you surprised that Teen Spirit isn't on this tribute album?
I mean, how old is Post Malone?
I want to say maybe around our age, maybe most likely younger, because we're old men.
I'm going to look this up because the comment I want to make right now is just that Post Malone is too old to be singing about Teen Spirit.
Fair. But
29. He's a 95 born guy.
But for a Nirvana tribute album, is that too on the nose, or is that something you would probably leave out as well?
So, I mean, to be fair, like, I've not heard this cover album. I don't really listen to Post Malone a lot. So I cannot tell you what what his sonically sort of leaning stylings are, I guess, for lack of a better description. I don't know if his style works for Smells Like Teen Spirit. Maybe that's why it's not.
Honestly, this is essentially Post Malone karaoke. This is like pretty much one-to-one instrumentals with him just singing over it.
Oh, so it's not like a country cover.
No.
Oh, okay. I don't think he could have done a good rendition of Smells Like Teen Spirit then.
Fair.
Because I've never heard Post Malone yelling in that way.
It's decent. It's decent.
Interesting.
But in terms of my partner's haul, she also picked up, speaking about Post Malone, the Taylor Swift Fortnite 7-inch.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, I tripped up on that too.
Boys,
you can't just like.
She has a song called Fortnite. It's not
The girl from
actually
Fortnite.
about Fortnite, but
Okay.
Oh, okay.
God.
Okay.
Is this how brain rotten we are?
Yeah.
To be fair, we're on a video game podcast. And
Yes.
you kind of did not explain it.
I admit I talk about Fortnite.
She's not in Fortnite though, right? I don't think she's.
She's not in Fortnite. Post Malone,
yeah.
other than having songs in festival, is not in Fortnite either.
Yeah.
And then finally, my partner also picked up Oasis Time Flies, the complete singles collection, for LPs. Mainly, so the story went to only had 4 of these sets allocated, and when we got to our turn in line, Matt behind us, he especially wanted it, and there was only 2 left, so it was one of those, we like Oasis enough where we thought we'd pick it up as well. But what were you really here for?
I got a question. I got a question before we move on from the records, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm curious, how do you guys store the 4 LP, like the box sets for vinyls? Because that's one of the toughest things in my place. Like, I do not know how to actually display those correctly.
Anything with multiple discs, especially in a collection, they're just in the original packaging for us.
But like, are they in like a crate, or like, do you put them elsewhere?
They're they're just in our like vinyl record area. But
okay.
So those were my partner's purchases, and for my personal purchases as well, I went with A Tribe Called Quest, Low End Theory, Record Store Day release, Freddie Gibbs, You Only Live Once, Charlie XCX, Number One Angel, Gorillaz, Demon Days Live from Apollo Theater, Flying Lotus, Spirit Box EP, and the hat. So I also wanted to get Biba Doobies live in acoustic in London. That was sold out by the time we got in line. Anderson .Paak's Come Down. I kind of felt bad about paying $23 for a single, so I didn't pick that up. And then Little Uzi Vert's Eternal Atake / Love versus the World 2. Only got 2 copies. They still had 1 more copy when it was my turn in line. So I picked that up as well. And that was our record day 2025 haul. Made a friend, but don't know how to actually keep connections with new people. So I guess I'm also in No New Friends camp. And the following evening, we went to a local venue, which is like a pool hall, bowling alley. But we also checked out a band called Lavender Town. I believe they're Toronto-based. And essentially, they are a 6-piece, I want to say jazz adjacent band who does their own stuff, but they also do covers, which Rakush, I sent you when they did a cover of MF Doom's One Beer. They did a nice Zelda medley. They also did a nice Minecraft medley. Big Minecraft fans from when they were talking to the audience. So I think if you're looking for something jazz adjacent, check out Lavender Town. Matt, what Pokemon city or town would also make a good band name?
Oh, I didn't consider that they were Lavender Town like Pokemon. I just thought they liked the flower. Oh man.
But anything come to mind?
I don't know. You know what? Like a kind of like beep boop kind of I guess like technically I don't know what genre that would really be. But like I think like a very robotic sounding kind of music would be really good if they were named like Pewter City.
That would be pretty good. Julian, Rakush, any other potential Pokemon inspired band names come to mind?
Victory Road? Not a town, but
Victory
Road can be like an 80s rock band.
Yeah.
That feels like a really good hair metal tribute band.
Mm-hmm.
Also the name of an Impact Wrestling pay-per-view, Victory Road.
Fair. But as someone also still awaiting my physical game that I sent you in the mail, Rakush.
Yes.
Based on the Pokemon you've played so far, any towns come to mind? Potential band names?
Honestly, nothing coming to mind, but like the strategy for me would be dependence on how subtle you want to be with your like homage.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're a straight up like video game cover band, yeah, you probably want to go for like an obvious name. But like if you're trying to be subtle about it and like sneak in references here and there, like you probably want to go with like a lesser known town.
Fair. How do you guys feel about a band being named after like one of their routes?
I was just thinking that, and like maybe even after like TM or HM moves.
Oh, would you say the actual move or just TM and a number?
The TM number, I think, is a good reference there.
Yeah, it has to be like some kind of Pokemon move that has to do with music or like sound, and then it's just that like TM number.
Yeah, like HM03 for surf, and then you do like surf rock or something. I don't know.
That would actually be pretty good. That'd be
Or
actually
like
pretty good.
or like whatever like the TM or HM number is for Rock Smash.
Also pretty
That's a
good.
good one. Yeah.
I think that's 6. I want to say 6.
Which is
but
the
might not be.
HM for cut?
1.
I think that would be a
think.
good like DJ name, but
Yeah. But also like you get a little bit close to like naming yourself close to TM Revolution, which you also probably want to avoid.
yeah, but we're not saying the move. We're saying like the 2 letters and the number. I
I
think
guess.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that would also just be a good collective where you have one band, but sort of like Slipknot, where everyone is just like HM or TM with a number, and then when you all do your solo projects, it's like a specific genre. But when you come together, like Voltron, you have whatever. But
I
yeah,
feel that. I feel that.
that was my adventures during Record Store Day 2025. I thank you guys for indulging me in that. But to keep it video game adjacent, at least for now, there was a new release that came out last week that Julie and I have been playing. I picked it during our initial drafting during our Mistake Zone Fantasy Critic draft, and that is South of Midnight, a new game from Compulsion Games. And Julian, before we kind of get into South of Midnight proper, have you played any of the other Compulsion games?
I think they have what's that game where it's like you're like a shadow person?
Oh, I
Uh
didn't play that. That was one of their first ones, I believe. I played,
yeah, I think a contrast.
yeah,
Contrast
Contrast.
is the one I played, yeah.
Where in terms of my experience with Compulsion, I played We Happy Few, and uh not sure if you remember way back when during
Mhm,
Saturday Morning
mhm.
Arcade proper said that I backed that game on Kickstarter as well. Where Julian, based on your time with Contrast and my time with We Happy Few, uh, I don't know about you personally, but with We Happy Few, I really thought that aesthetically and just overall presentation, overall vibe, and potentially the story were really that game's strong suits,
Mhm.
where they really created a world that really made me want to explore and learn more of. And it's only when you kind of got to the pseudo survival aspects, and if you followed kind of their development cycle, it really went from, oh, this more open world survival game to them kind of adjusting it to have a more straightforward narrative, just because reception to the actual survival mechanics weren't the best. And for contrast, was it something similar where maybe the game world was there, but maybe the gameplay just didn't, you know, hold up to it?
Yeah, I'd probably say it's around the same. Like
Hmm.
stylistically it had contrast kind of had that like noir art deco like kind of feel. But I think the big thing about it is, I mean, it's, and I'll kind of get into it when we talk about South of Midnight proper. But I think for contrast, it was like it had a cool concept where you're kind of jumping into shadows and you're doing all this shadow things. But it's like it's cool at the start, but then it does kind of get like okay, like it kind of puts all the cards on the table at the start, but then it doesn't really go much deeper into it
There.
after a while. So yeah, that's kind of what I found with that game.
And I think after my time with We Happy Few, my worry about South of Midnight was that this might be a same scenario. The world building would be top notch, but maybe the gameplay wasn't necessarily there. And while I do think gameplay wise, it is a lot stronger than We Happy Few. Then again, it is a completely different game than that was, but just mechanically, I think it is a lot stronger in comparison to their previous work. But at the same time, I feel like it doesn't necessarily match up to its peers that sort of, you know, are in a similar genre. But Julie, with your time with South of Midnight, I guess just my first question to you, what are your overall impressions about your time with the game?
Yeah, so I played it. I finished it. Um, And I think so. Before I kind of get started, I wanted to kind of like acknowledge like, because there's a lot of like when it comes to South of Midnight, there's a lot of talks about it online, as it were. But before I kind of get really into it, like I do want to acknowledge that when it comes to like this type of game, and when it comes to thematically, and the idea of what it is politically, like I can really I want to acknowledge like how difficult it probably was to kind of pitch this game and to kind of create, especially in the climate that we're kind of in. And then also I've seen a lot of people kind of talk online about the idea of like, sometimes not every game is for you, because sometimes a game is for a specific community or culture and all that stuff. And, some people are saying that if you don't understand it, like, like that's fine. And I am definitely in the camp of thinking that not everything has to be for everyone.
Right.
I definitely feel like certain art is very reflective of certain, groups and communities and cultures and people. And sometimes, not everything has to be for everyone. Not everyone has to have a mass appeal. And I kind of really buy into that as well. Like, but I think when it comes to South of Midnight, I don't know, I guess I'll start with what I like, I guess.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of things that I do want to get into when it comes to stuff that I'm like, ooh, that didn't really land super well. But to kind of start with what I like I definitely will say that in terms of aesthetics, like we talked about, it's beautiful, like bar none. Like it's such a cool style. There's so many cool details. The game really digs into that stop motion thing where it's like when it zooms into the characters, you sometimes see, like when you think of claymation, you sometimes think of like the fingerprint on like characters because they're made out of clay. And when it zooms into the characters, like you kind of see that it's like those small details that really kind of like transcend it, where it's like, this is very clearly a passion project, very clearly like the people working on this, very much care deeply with what they're doing. And when it comes to the aesthetics and the mythology around it, if you're not familiar with it, it is very much a story that is rooted in like the deep south of America, and it goes into a lot of the mythology around that. And it is something that is not explored super well in video games, so it's really cool to see that. The platforming I really enjoyed. I think it's probably the gameplay aspect that I liked the most. It's very reminiscent, I think, of Alice Madness Returns in my head, like when I was playing it. Like there's a lot of like, like you're platforming, you're like, you're having like mobility moves, like floating, like all this stuff. And I think that's the part that I really, really liked. And the combat is serviceable. It's not the greatest, and I'll kind of get into that when if we kind of get into the part where it's like my qualms with it. But that's kind of what I wanted to start with, was what I liked. But I'm not sure if you want to jump in there, Jaren.
No, for sure. Just as an extension to that, I think this game is a really beautiful game. And when we first initially saw this at that Xbox Spotlight, I think a couple of months ago, there was that worry that, if they're following that animation style that we saw from the Spider-Verse films, that it might be kind of off-putting to potentially a portion of your audience. And I was really pleasantly surprised that they do pull it off, especially during the cinematics, where
I agree.
I think it really does just look nice, and it isn't as it is something you get used to. But if you are a fan of the Spider-Verse films, I think you'd feel right in home that, you won't blink an eye at it. I think we briefly mentioned it in passing, Julian, but I wish that we kind of did take that further into the actual gameplay itself, just because when you're controlling the protagonist Hazel, it is a lot more smoother, where I think if the kind of applied the same effects to the actual gameplay,
there's a weird contrast, because like when you're moving, it's a very smooth FPS, but then the moment you stop moving, she comes back to like that low frame rate
Yeah, where her
claymation.
idle animations are kind of in that style. And I don't know, I feel like you either go all in gameplay wise as well, or
Mhm.
you don't bother at that point, just because it is kind of awkward when your idle animations are just really portraying what you see in the cinematics, where I could have left it like with that. But yeah, just to go off what Julian said, I think the deep south setting, especially with the folklore elements that it presents, is definitely something I don't necessarily see a lot in the video games that I personally engage with. So it was really nice just to see um, the different, town dynamics, the family dynamics, and just some of the character interactions, the trials and tribulations that our protagonist Hazel goes through. I think they are really well done. And personally, I like Hazel as a protagonist. She is your typical, young adult, teenage girl trying to really not only figure it out for herself, but handling that family dynamic of a single mom with a, you know, as a child that is biracial, and then her family on her father's side not necessarily wanting to do kind of a lot with her, and that idea that they might even try to take advantage of her. There is this uneasy feeling whenever she does interact with her grandmother that I really
Mhm.
think is done for the most part tastefully, and I
Yeah,
think
I'd
that
agree with that.
relationship in general made me want to push forward with the story just to see how that relationship, not only with her grandmother but with her mother who she's searching for, kind of unfolds. But when it gets to the more areas that I'm lukewarm with, since you opened the floodgates, Julian, I the combat leaves a lot to be desired. I know this is a
Yeah.
very Alice Madness Returns coded game, similar kind of in that magic aspect, but also the platforming and then the combat, which is your light character action. But I honestly feel like the hits don't feel satisfying at all. I feel like the cooldowns on your active abilities are too long, and I don't think there's a way to reduce cooldowns where you can't really get into the flow of things, where in theory you want to chain all your abilities together, but I feel like if you mess up one rotation, the cooldowns are just long enough where you're just really going around your arena area waiting for them to kind of refresh for you to try again. And I do think the enemies swarm you in a weird way where if you kind of mistime your abilities, you might just be caught in a attack stun loop where you're just being hit one after the other, and I feel like that doesn't do great. And for a game that seems to ramp up, or for a game that's so strong narratively, for the amount of combat you eventually find yourself in towards the later half of the game, correct me if I'm wrong, Julian. I don't know. I thought that was just off
Yeah,
putting.
like the last few levels, unfortunately, and I'm not sure if it's a matter of like they ran out of time, but the last few levels of that game are more or less like hallways into battle arenas.
And that's a shame since it's such I do think it's a strong narrative, but for them to kind of rely on combat as much as they do, a lot of the time I was like debating just going into the accessibility menu and just seeing what I could tweak to maybe make this a bit more easier to swallow. Just because I think even after you unlock all your abilities, the cooldowns I feel like are too long. I feel like your hit
Yeah.
boxes are. This is a really apparent during boss battles where it's one of those, a ranged attack will have a red zone on the ground that you have to avoid. And you might be outside of a red zone, but if you're just close enough, you seem to get hit anyway, which I don't know. I feel like that just made some of the boss fights, especially, pretty bad as well. But Julie, do you have any thoughts on the combat?
Yeah, I agree with the aspect that the cooldowns are too long. So you learn all of your skill set at the start of the game, or like pretty early on, but they kind of drip feed the upgrades to you where they're kind of locked by level. So even if you have the upgrade like currency to upgrade, like you can't use it until you a certain level, and I think that might be detrimental because one of the things you mentioned is there's no way to speed up cooldowns, but there are ways to speed up cooldowns, but it is quite literally like the last tiers of upgrades that you unlock. And it really changes how the game plays because then now you have to start considering pulling these moves. So for example, like just a quick example, there's a push ability where you can like force push people. But the last tier upgrade for it is if you're force pushing people, if you use the force push and it affects 2 or 3 more people, it's an instant cooldown. So then it kind of incentivizes you to group people together and then use the attack as opposed to just using it. But the unfortunate fact is that it comes way too late where you're kind of at that point comfortable in, because you literally get in like the last like 2 or 3 levels, the last tier of upgrades. And by that point, I feel like you're already kind of comfortable in like a flow of like what worked well for you. So like, you know, you already kind of have those motions so that it's kind of hard to untrain yourself and then train yourself with these new abilities or these new like criterias for these abilities. So I think I feel like they should have allowed you to kind of get those upgrade tiers a lot earlier.
Yeah.
And I think my problem too is the big thing is like when I think of character action, I think of Devil May Cry. And again, I'm not saying this has to be as deep as Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, but the fact that there are no types of like air juggles or being able to use your skills in the air, I feel like it kind of like takes away that feeling that I have when I'm playing Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, where it's like, you know, it doesn't matter where I am, I can still react or I can still act. In this game, you pretty much like you have to stay on the ground if you want to be able to react or if you want to be able to do anything. The moment you're in the air, you're kind of like the only thing you can do in the air is a smash attack, like smash down attack. But like once you're in the air, you're pretty much kind of like, okay, there's nothing else you can really do. So there's really no point in like, you know, jumping or like there's no forms of juggles. And I wish if they added that, I feel like they could have expanded that combat a little bit more. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that combat.
I mean, Hazel as a character, she can double jump, she can air glide, where if you have a scorpion get over here move that either, you know, pulls
exactly
a character to you or
because
you know,
she does have that, but it's only usable on the ground.
it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And I apologize to you, friends, but come on, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning had a really good scorpion get over here pull, and I feel like I associate that with a high standard of character action games. And again, not saying this has to be a character action game just because Compulsion is known for their narrative, but I just wish it was a bit more open. Cooldowns were a bit, you know, less demanding, and I feel like it just doesn't feel as good as I'd hoped, where it really reminds me of Alice Madness Returns in that, you know, combat wasn't, it was, you know, character action adjacent, but I think the dodge felt way better in that game compared to the one here, where the moment I unlock the 2 consecutive dodges in a row, I sort of felt like it opened up combat in a bit, but all that did was make me more defensive, which you kind of have to be with this game, where I'm not saying it's a Dark Souls, you have to roll and then plan your attacks, but I don't know. I just feel like it's really lacking there, and that was unfortunate. But I think narrative-wise, you play as Hazel, and she is known as a weaver, and as a weaver, you're able to essentially, during her quest to find her mother, she has to essentially she'll meet characters each with their own personal trauma, and as a weaver it's up to her to really gather up said trauma in the form of clearing a combat arena and then seeing a flashback and then putting that all together to hopefully kind of relieve them of their trauma by the end of a chapter. And I think that brings me to personally my biggest issue with South of Midnight is the first instance of you being a spirit weaver is when you meet a pair of brothers, Rhubarb and Benji, and you play through this chapter, you see the history behind these two brothers, and you ultimately come face to face with who Benji is now, and essentially present sort through all you bottle up all his trauma, and you essentially give him the pattern that's created from that. And I think my biggest issue is that you don't see the effects of what you just did, where I feel like with the three instances that I've essentially invaded someone's psyche and bottled up all their trauma, I've never got a clear indication of this is the conclusion, this is the result of you sorting through everything. It's sort of weird in that, oh, I'm gonna look into everyone's past, I'm gonna bottle it up for them, and then I'm just gonna move on with no actual end conclusion. And that really made it feel underwhelming. I'm not sure if you agree, Julie, but how did you feel about Hazel's weaving powers and the story that they tried to tell with it?
Yeah, so I think that also is kind of, so I finished the game, and I think I was hoping, kind of hoping and holding on to the idea that there is kind of explained like near the end of the game or like at the end of the game. But as I finished it, like I think that also ends up unfortunately being my largest criticism of this game. So just to kind of like, you mentioned Hazel being a weaver, and like the idea is the game kind of presents it as the weaver is supposed to. So basically, the game puts forward that if you if you have experienced severe injustice or trauma, it kind of leaves a scar in like the area of where it happens, as well as to you where you transform into something. So a lot of the monsters you're dealing with, well, monsters in quotations here, because they're, at the end of the day, they're like people. But a lot of the monsters, quote unquote, that you deal with are people that have been transformed because of the trauma that they have experienced. And then that trauma has kind of reached out where it has extended and affected the area or the people or the location that they're kind of around. So that's when you kind of see the term they use is a stigma, the stigma around. So you kind of see a lot of these like boils and stuff, and these like, things on the ground. So that's kind of the thing it's kind of putting forward. And it's putting forward the idea that as Hazel is a weaver, she is able to kind of help these people with their trauma to clear the stigma, etc., etc. And that's kind of what it's trying to put forward. But I think the thing, and I had to kind of sit with this at the end of the game, because I was trying to really think about why this didn't land for me. Why? So like when you're, I will start with something I did like is this game is kind of like a musical, wherein when you are leading up to this moment of healing a person, like there's always a song. Each person has a song, and it's very beautiful. And then you quote unquote heal them. So presentation wise and aesthetically, it's cool. Like it kind of can bring you to tears a little. But I think it doesn't land because thematically, I don't think it makes sense. Because I think what it's doing is it's trying to bring up the idea of generational trauma and generational trauma through either injustice of whether you face injustice through racism or injustice through because you're neurodivergent. But the idea is that you have faced some wrong, and that is what caused hurt, and that hurt is what caused, you to transform, as well as what's caused the area around you to transform. But I think the thing that I kind of came to the conclusion with, and why it doesn't land for me, is because when it comes to trauma, I feel like there's a difference between addressing a trauma internally versus being an external force that addresses trauma. So for games and media that does it well, for me, trauma I feel has to be addressed internally in some way. So when I think of Everything Everywhere All at Once, the main character in that film, the journey is her realizing that she is the source of trauma for her child, and then kind of having to address that. So there is an idea of having to really realize that you are the source of trauma, you have to take accountability, and then like even if we don't see the full path of healing, we have an idea of where that healing is going to start and where that healing might, go. 1000 Times Resist, like I talk about this a lot, but that game is all about the idea of this generational trauma faced by, similar to South of Midnight, faced by racial injustice and prejudice. But at the same time, with 1000 Times Resist, it's this whole community, but they're a whole community of clones of this single person, the mother. So the clones kind of have to work through this trauma, and even though it's external, by being clones, they are by proxy kind of working through that trauma of the mother, right? So there's still kind of like an internal working there. Same with Disco Elysium. So Disco Elysium, you play as Harry Dubois, and you literally start the game with no memories because you have reached such a low point that your psyche breaks. And when you level up in Disco Elysium, you're literally putting points into your psyche where you are then building yourself back up. So it's like this form of healing through gameplay, right? So the thing is, when you're playing these games or going through this media, you kind of see that path towards healing. And when it comes to trauma, healing is it's not a straight road. It looks different for everyone, right? Healing can be therapy. Healing can be medication. Healing can be, it can be accountability. Healing can be, just cutting people out of your life that, have harmed you. But I think, unfortunately, with South of Midnight, the problem is that you're an external force that is like technically, quote unquote, healing other people. And I don't think it really works well because in a way, you're kind of taking that agency of healing away, where it's like, I know you face an injustice and it sucks, but I'm here to heal you now. So it's kind of like this weird, like, faith healing kind of situation where it's like, like you are healed now because of my powers or my magic. And I feel like that is hard because then the question comes, well, how are they healed?
Mm-hmm.
Are they now open to going through therapy? Are they now open to working through what happened to them? And I think the problem also is that, unfortunately, when it comes to the ideas of what these people have faced when it comes to like, systemic prejudice or systemic racism, the external source of their trauma still exists, right? As Hazel, you're not taking down the systems that have traumatized the people that you are healing. So you are healing them, but like those systems still exist, right?
So like you're selling me on this game as way more of an accurate therapist simulator because like with regular therapy, just when you think you have a breakthrough, your session's over. And then you have to wait for the next one. And then it's just like you never necessarily in like, one moment know what the healing is. And
Yeah.
I did have a question for you guys without getting into spoilers because this does sound like a very fascinating game and I do want to play it. If you guys need to go into spoilers, please be my guest for this answer. But healing is not like a one moment thing when it comes to therapy, right?
It's not though. That's what I'm saying though. With South of Midnight, there's like this like aspect where it's like, sorry, I cut you off, but you continue.
Oh, good. Thank you. Basically, the question I want to ask is just like in that moment where, say, like, whatever the stage or the quest or whatever is done, where like you're done with a person's psyche, you have a breakthrough, they don't follow up on that. And like, is it left open-ended by design then to say that there's no healing? Or is it just that like there's no moment of acknowledgement of that in the game itself?
So I think for me, and Jaren can disagree for sure, but I think that's why my thing is like 100%, like I said, healing isn't linear. And the problem is that it's not really acknowledged in the game. You say you heal someone, but then you get a very short cutscene of them kind of turning back into like a into a person, and then you kind of just moving along after. So I think my problem is that, yeah, 100% it could be left open where it's like, we're not going to be clear on like, because what I'm saying is I'm not saying they should immediately come out on the other end and be like, oh, I feel fine now. I feel fine that I faced this injustice. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you're not really kind of shown to have done anything really.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Like everyone kind of just looks and acts the same after you have kind of quote unquote healed them. And I think as a video game, I think my big question is that, and this isn't like meant to be an insult because it is a very beautiful game and it's a very beautiful story. But I think my question is why this story had to be told in the medium of video games, because video games is an interactive medium. And I feel like when it comes to video games, there's a expectation of satisfaction when you, as an interactive player, are affecting the world around you. But if you are not doing that, then I feel like this would have been better suited to be told as something else, like a stop motion film, for example. Because you would still kind of get that story, and you can. I think with video games, it's hard to cut away from the main character for too long. But as an animated film, you can maybe cut away from the people you're healing and kind of shown, okay, like this is the conclusion or this is what happened. This is how you have affected them in some way. And maybe it's not fully healed, but at the very least, they're kind of taking that first step. But I think the problem is it's like you're not really getting anything.
So, playing a little bit of a devil's advocate here, I think the medium depends on who's writing the story, right? Like, if you are good at writing, write a book, I guess. If you're good at making a video, you go and make like a, short film, a feature-length film, whatever the story dictates, of course, there. But like, there is an inherent just sort of like, hey, this is my strength. I'm going to do it like this, right? Like musicians will put it into music. They'll create instrumentals for it and stuff like that, right? Like, I think that absolutely depends on what like the artist's strengths are. Now, I know this is a studio, but I did just quickly look it up. The writer and director of the game is David Sears, and David Sears was born in Mississippi, so like that's a life lived at least. So like that's where I just kind of want to play a little bit of a devil's advocate to say maybe it's just that this was his strength, right? Like maybe making it a video game was the way he thought it needed to go out there. Which I do have one more question for the two of you guys. I don't know how much more you guys want to talk about this, but for me, the big question, based on everything you're saying, it is fair and interesting that it might have fallen a little bit short of hopes or expectations. Does it at least feel like the author achieved what they set out to do?
I think. Oh, Jaren, you can go. Sorry, I've been talking too long.
Julian marinate on that for a minute, but I think just to kind of play off what Julian said, and to sort of answer your question, Rakush, I'm gonna do light spoilers for the first major chapter of the game, which was the rhubarb. I apologize if one of the brothers' name wasn't rhubarb, but rhubarb
it is
in
I
my
think
mind right now. And then Benji, where the way the quest plays out is you meet rhubarb, and it's kind of, at least to me as the player, as the watcher, that rhubarb's carrying some sort of guilt towards him, and you meet him kind of in passing at his cabin, and he's someone who gives you a key item that really is essentially the bottle that you collect all these memory fragments that you find throughout your the game. So as you continue with the chapter, you learn more about the relationship between Rhubarb and his brother Benji, and ultimately the conclusion of it is you face Benji, and then you present him with the bottle of the memories that you find, which shows why the relationship between Rhubarb and Benji is the way it is, and why ultimately Benji is presented as the quote-unquote monster, as Julian alluded to, that he is today. And this is where it kind of falls apart for me is, again, I understand that with sorting through trauma and, you know, the healing process, it isn't instantaneous. But I think this might be unfair to say, but as a video game medium and as a player, you're kind of, you know, you come to expect certain things. You kind of come to expect resolution, or even at least some sort of acknowledgement that your journey to collecting all these memories wasn't for naught. But kind of at the end of this, you present the memories to Benji, and then Hazel's on her way. Where the reason I mentioned it's kind of the fault of the medium is, as a player, I went back to Rhubarb's cabin just to see if anything were to happen, because just as much as Benji's a victim in this scenario, so is Rhubarb in a way. And nothing happens when you go to the cabin. It's still the same canned dialogue that Rhubarb gives you when you first leave for the first time. And it's the fact that there's no acknowledgement that anything happens to both parties that really got to me. And that's kind of the extension to the next, when you meet Tom, where even though Tom's a victim, so is the two other characters associated with his story. And you don't get any acknowledgement from either of those characters, one for obvious reasons, but then one for, you know, they're still available, and you would hope that there would be some sort of resolution between them, but there isn't, where it just feels flat in a way of, you're doing all these things, you're sorting through all these memories, you're presenting all these memories, and the game doesn't acknowledge whatever you do. And that left me with the feeling of, oh, it's really oddly voyeuristic and kind of icky to a point where, I don't know, it's you sorting through all these memories, through all these memory fragments, and nothing comes to it, where it seems like I'm just intruding in someone's trauma, and without even a sliver of acknowledgement that they're being able to reflect over that, or using that to better face whatever they're facing, is just kind of weird. And I think that's where it falls apart for me, where it's such a beautiful game. Some of the themes that it tackles, once again, are things that should be explored, just because in terms of representation, you don't necessarily see them represented a lot. And yet I feel like it could still, I'm not saying everything needs to be you being that chosen one that solves everyone's problems at the bat, but I just want some sort of acknowledgement that, okay, maybe these characters are able to kind of take a step forward for this. But instead it's, okay, that was a fun side quest, I guess, but me as Hazel, I'm going to carry on with my own missions. Where I'm not sure if you agree, Julian, but I think it just, the lack of acknowledgement is weird. And the fact that when you try to tackle it as a game, where you try to go back to all these relevant characters because you're able to, and nothing kind of changes, and I don't mean nothing changes in terms of their personalities, but I'm getting the same canned voices that I got when I first met the characters, where I don't know if that's an oversight, but it feels like there should be something there and it isn't. And that's kind of what got to me.
Yeah, and I will like kind of confirm, like, as someone who finished the game, like the only time the game actually hangs around and shows you a kind of like, quote unquote, not really a conclusion, but a way your actions have affected the people you're healing, is like the last one. Is like the last people you weave, quote unquote, together. Which is, you know, a crazy thing to say when the whole game is primarily built on this idea of you're weaving people. So like the only time you really see any, you know, effect or any like anything when it comes to your actions, like it's literally the last one.
And it's kind of weird because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the tutorial is essentially you seeing the previous Weaver actively helping a family escape. And then you're seeing direct actions that the Weaver is taking to physically help this family get to a boat so they can flee for a better life. And in turn, you as Hazel, again, are just collecting these memories, presenting it to the monster at the quote unquote monster at the end, and then moving on, where it's just a weird, maybe I'm missing something. And again, I've admitted on this podcast plenty of times that I'm a dumb boy, but I feel like something was missing where there was some sort of disconnect with Hazel using her powers as opposed to how the powers from the previous Weaver are presented when you're during the tutorial. So I think that was also just kind of a disconnect that also bothered me.
Yeah. No, I'd agree, and I think I started this, and I'm very completely open to being wrong about every single thing I've said because, like I started with, I acknowledge that this is it kind of feels like a very personal story to the writer, and maybe I am missing something, and I'm 100% if I'm wrong, like that's fine, like I'm okay with that. But I think my problem here is there are hooks in the game to make this about an internal addressing of trauma because Hazel, a lot of the game is kind of centered around this idea of Hazel and their relationship with their, like you mentioned, Hazel's biracial. On the father's side, and the grandmother is more or less like their relationship with his grandmother who abandoned them pretty much because, and it's not really said why, but there's kind of hints about maybe either being the socioeconomic of the mother as well as possibly race reasons. That is probably very affecting the Hazel, and it is in a lot of ways, as well as Hazel's relationship to her mother. So there are a lot of hooks of you could explore the inner relationships that Hazel has with these members and still kind of have that journey where there is an avenue to kind of have that internal healing, or at the very least internal steps towards healing for the main character, where as a player you're more invested in the character and you spend time with Hazel, so you can kind of make it you can kind of have it be through the whole game and kind of put the focus on that. So I think that's kind of where my my difficulties kind of lie in is that idea that there is an aspect of this where you could have easily transitioned it from an external as an external force of healing to a internal story of dealing with that generational trauma and that racial prejudice and that systemic racism. So it had those hooks, but it doesn't really kind of get too deep into those hooks because it does want to focus on Hazel as a weaver of other people, of healing other people. And to kind of just jump back to like Rakush's question of whether or not I feel like the writer kind of accomplished what they're doing, I guess it kind of depends on what their goal was, because I think it's because of the way the game is framed, I feel like it's very hard to tell what the writer was trying to kind of accomplish. Because if they're trying to talk about the idea of living in the deep south of America and the systemic prejudice that you could face, then yeah, they made it pretty clear, and I think they did accomplish that. But I think if it is, because when you start the game, it kind of has this blurb about the idea of it's gonna talk about deep topics. So if you open the game, there's a blurb and it says like it's gonna talk about deep topics, but for first and foremost, the game is about healing, and that is like the first like thing that the game kind of opens with. It is about healing. So if we take that as the purpose of this game, I think unfortunately it doesn't really do that. It doesn't really go too deeply into, because at the end of the day, like I don't know what it means when we're healing people. Like when I read through the encyclopedia because I was so confused, and maybe I am like a dumb. I'm okay with that, and I'll own up to it if I miss something. But I go into the encyclopedia after you heal someone, and it's still not clear like what you did. It's like you quote unquote healed them, but like healed them from what? You know what I mean? It's like, did I heal them? Did I make them forget about their trauma? Did they book a therapist appointment the next day? Like, did they acknowledge like their accountability towards the harm that they have caused? Like, none of that is ever shared with you. And if the purpose, going by that blurb saying like this game is about healing, if that is the purpose, then I haven't really felt like I accomplished that personally.
Yeah, I think just at the end, I do want to see this to the conclusion, but to Julian's point, I think the story that revolves around Hazel shows a lot of promise to me. It just goes with themes, with topics that I think would make for a really interesting narrative. It is but unfortunately, since it is Hazel being, and I guess that's what you have to do for a game. You have to utilize the powers that she's given and show, and maybe that's the cynic in me, is for you to have these different set piece moments, for you to have these particular boss fights, you need potential enemy designs. And from the way this Hazel story is presented, you might not necessarily get those. So that's why they're lifting from other relationships, other characters, and creating set pieces from there, where even though they look beautiful, it ultimately, for me personally, takes away from the potential of Hazel's story and really kind of makes it feel like busy work. And again, maybe I'm being unfair in saying that. I want some sort of acknowledgement from these other, characters that you interact with, that characters' memories that you deal with. But the fact that nothing really happens at the end really makes it for naught. And again, the cynic in me says, oh, okay, that was just a way to not only prolong Hazel's story, but create a level for you as a spectacle. And I don't know, maybe that's where it feels a bit more underwhelming to me, where I think Hazel's story has a lot of potential where you could explore and as a result make appropriate levels. But I don't know, I could do without giant trees or giant animals as set pieces in favor of something that's more tied to Hazel, as opposed to, hey, the reason you see the set piece is because of this other character, and that's that. And I don't know, that's where the game really falters for me, where even though the environments are beautiful, even though the presentation can be really beautiful, I think it just doesn't, it's not quite there for me. And that's the biggest shame, just because I like a lot of elements of it, but equally, or maybe more so, there's just a lot of things that don't vibe with me, unfortunately. But it is, if you, Matt, Rakush, if you think this sounds interesting anyway, I do recommend it for you just to kind of check it out, just to see how Hazel's story unfolds. And maybe you guys will get something more out of it that I might be missing, or maybe Julian might be missing. But as someone who generally likes the time I've spent with the game, I don't know, I feel like there could have been so much more to it. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling by the end of it. But Julian, any closing thoughts on South of Midnight?
I think at the end of the day, like, I really enjoyed. I enjoyed my time with it. I talked to your guys' ears off about like my one qualm with it. But I think it's like an important thing because it does surround the thematic aspects of the game. But I think I want to see more of this. I think is at the end of the day, I want to see more of, like, I think the problem is with this one, it was very much like an origin story of like Hazel kind of learning and becoming this weaver. And I feel like that is important, but I would like to kind of see a continuation where maybe given enough time, they kind of iron out like the things I'm talking about, wherein, Hazel as a more experienced weaver, because like you mentioned, Jaren, like there is an aspect of it where you are watching the past weaver actually affecting and making changes. And I feel like if we hopefully, if this continues and if it goes well, I feel like there is a lot there. The foundation is good. It's just I feel like it needs to be ironed out more. I feel like if there was a sequel or more of this, then I would like to see more of that. Hazel being more of an experienced weaver and actually affecting change with the responsibilities and the powers that were given to her. And I think that's kind of where I landed at the end of this game.
There's definitely potential in the game. It's just I feel like it doesn't necessarily meet it, or there are definitely ways it can improve, but I still think it's an experience that, as rough as we might have been on it, I still think it's an experience that if you given the chance, you should at least check out, just because it is at the very least a story that you don't really see in this medium, to be completely honest, and yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want like the past few minutes to kind of color and make it kind of seem like I don't like this game. The thing that I feel like the reason I'm rough with it is because I really want to, really love this game. I really want to kind of see an aspect of this game that continues and it kind of irons out a lot of the things that I kind of mentioned. Because it is a very important story to tell. It is a story about the idea of, that systemic racism and how it can affect us. It talks about that idea of how that prejudice that we face on a daily can change us into, quote unquote, how it can affect us in a way where others perceive us as monsters, quote unquote, even though like we're just people. So it has very important themes and stories to tell. I feel like I just want it to be told in a way that it's like, that it fully utilizes the medium that it's in, the medium of gaming. Because my favorite video games are stories in video games that can only be told as video games. Like Nier Automata does not work, I don't think, as anything but as a video game because of how it's tied to that medium. And I feel like they're so close with this one. It's just it needs to be ironed out, and I feel like it. I hope there's a scenario where they continue with this and it is, they do, they come up with something that is a bit more ironed out. I think is what I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
So you're waiting for the sequel called Further Side of Midnight.
I hope they do make a sequel. I genuinely do hope so, yeah.
Also, I honestly feel like based on the conversation, like I do want to play it. But also, like, I will call you out on one thing. I feel like you're trying to be very cautious about criticizing this game because of the very stupid conversations that happen online when it comes to anything regarding, like, political subject matter, race, like, things like that as well. So I think it's fair for you to give like disclaimers, but I also kind of feel like giving too many disclaimers kind of takes away from sometimes like the credibility of what you're saying. So like, I think in this case, what you're saying is totally fair as a person that's not played these games, right? Like, I think we all experience media in unique ways as well. I get that. But there is at some point like a certain sort of objective element to these things where like it can still be a fantastic game. It can be a very unique, beautiful story to tell. Sometimes heartbreaking story to tell. But yeah, like if it doesn't do it well, like I think it's still fair to say like it's either lacking or you wish there was something more. And typically like people only wish for something more when like there's something that actually hooked them in the first place.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, yeah, maybe you're right where I am overcompensating for the discourse around this game. But at the same time, like I feel like that acknowledgement is kind of important because of
for sure
the things that are surrounding it. But at the same time, like, you kind of put it, very plainly and very accurately, and I 100% agree. Like I am, a lot of this comment, a lot of what I'm saying is because something did hook me initially. Like I feel like there was a very strong start, and I feel like I fell in love with it very early on. And then when a lot of these cracks started to form, that's when I'm like, like I wish this could have been better. I wish this could have, and yes, that's exactly like what you said.
Yeah.
I wish there was a version of this game that maybe had gone through like a couple more edits.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's totally fair. Also, like, Matt, you've been super quiet for this whole conversation. Do you actually want to play this game, or like?
Personally, I have no interest in playing this game after you guys said the combat isn't good.
That's why he's been checked out.
Like, I admit, like, I guess, like, what's the word? Luddite Philistine, something like that, where
what?
I don't really care about the art side of the
that's what I'm in for.
Games. Yeah, like I don't care about art in video games. And if the gameplay is bad, I'm not interested. I wanted to follow up earlier because like when I saw the gameplay for this, I saw that it was like, an action-based game that's around cooldowns, and that is always kind of an iffy statement because based on what you guys were saying, there isn't any kind of a real customization towards the gameplay side of this.
No.
So, there's no like quote unquote like builds that you can do,
No.
which is kind of unfortunate in what I would have been looking for in this game.
Just needs air juggles, man.
Also, I just want to point out quickly. Every time you talked about the Weaver, I kept you saying Weeber, like an anime weeb.
Oh.
So it was very confusing.
Honestly, story-wise, the way you guys are talking about, hey, like, oh, you're like a weaver trying to fix, what do you call it? Other people's trauma. The whole time that like, you guys were like on that plot point, I was honestly just thinking this sounds like the opposite of Persona 5.
Yeah.
It is kind of like when I mentioned it to Jaren when I was kind of like talking to Jaren while I was playing about it because like in Persona 5, like when you quote unquote like change their heart, there's an immediate change in that person of like I'm a good person now. But then it's weird because like you can't do that here where it's like if you quote unquote healed them and then there's an immediate change of like I'm healed now. I feel like I'm like, oh, that doesn't really work. Because then it's like you're once again taking away that process of healing. It's you're kind of just taking that agency away from that person. So there is that similarities, and I thought about that too, because I was like, what would actually, like, if I look at this game as it is now, what would actually like not really fix it, because like I don't know, some people might argue it's not broken, but in my opinion, like what would they have to do for me to be like, okay, I'm satisfied with this?
I mean, I would argue the people you fix would, looking at this from a Persona style, would need to become part of your party so that you can have a long-term... I think, like, yeah, what you were saying is that you don't have a long-term connection to the people that you're, like, quote-unquote fixing. And that's what party members are for.
Is this just Persona 4?
But...
These are... I think you're just looking for extended S-links is what
yeah, when you put it that way. But I think to the Persona comparison, like, with you, essentially trying to steal someone's heart or whatever I went on record as a Persona 4 fanboy, but I can't tell you what the steal your heart equivalent is in Persona 4, like making someone face their shadow or whatever. I feel like in those situations, it's pretty black and white. But if I had to be super honest and maybe unfair, if I were to go to the Benji Rhubarb relationship, there's a lot of gray, of course, but if you wanted to go strictly black and white, there is one is a victim, and then one person, to me, this is the person whose heart you need to steal. This is the person whose heart you need to change, but you don't, because if we were looking from a black and white perspective, there's only one person that you can actually, to me anyway, force quote unquote a change onto, because the other party, for the most part, you can't. Or maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but again, that goes to my issue of maybe I am looking for something like Persona where there is some sort of acknowledgement of what you did, but with South of Midnight, it is no, just carry on. And maybe that's for better, maybe that's for worse. To me, that's for worse. And yeah, I guess to Rakush's comment of me being kind of cautious, I do like this story, but at the same time, I can acknowledge that combat's not great. For me as a video game player, I want that sense of acknowledgement. I'm not getting. And I will give it, though, Hazel does go through a costume change midway to through the story. I like that costume. I think it's a good costume that also suits her well. And I do agree with Julian's point that if you fully went into Alice Madness Returns territory and gave her a costume change at real level, I would have been fine with that as well.
Heck yeah. That's what I would have ignored any qualms I had with this game if she got.
No, so that's what fixes trauma.
Yeah, costume changes. Capitalism.
Yeah.
Capitalism is what fixes trauma.
I'm not even saying that sarcastically. I literally just went and bought a new pair of shoes before this earlier today because it's baseball season. So yeah, new outfits really solves the problem.
Sometimes you just need some retail therapy, man.
Listen,
That's it.
Oh,
I
you know what?
bought 2 pairs of shoes in the last month. But they're, to be fair, I've spent like $50 on each, so it's not like that expensive. But I have bought 2 new pairs of shoes this year.
Sorry, Matt,
Yeah.
you were saying something?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, going back to the Persona thing, you know, if we finished that game, it probably would have been way more apt to say, hey, this is a lot more like Metaphor Refantasio. So I'm pretty sure that whole game is about prejudice as well, theme-wise anyways.
Yeah. No, I finished that game as well, and I think Metaphor does deal with that idea of systemic racism and prejudice like a lot better. But I think you kind of have. I never thought about this as I was thinking about South of Midnight, but I think you've kind of like outlined my problem with it is that it just doesn't have enough room to breathe when it
Right.
comes to these themes.
When
When it comes to RPGs, they can be like 100-hour monsters, right? And with that, you haven't.
South of Midnight.
Like 12 hours?
I finished it in like 9 hours,
Oh,
10 hours.
Okay. Maybe
Ish.
I'm just trying to find like the collectibles that ultimately don't feel like they do much.
Yeah,
Maybe Julian's just a better gamer than you are, Jared.
true.
Damn.
Top tier.
No, guys, I've gone on record. I'm bad at video games. You guys have podcasted with me for over a decade now. You know I'm bad at video games, so
I don't know, bro. You were the assist when I got the pentakill in League of Legends.
That's old Jared. That's old Jared. That's prime
That was
Jared.
14 years ago, and I will hold on to that for the rest of my life.
Rakush,
That's like when like one of those like old dudes talks about being in their
that's
prime
what I was
in
about
high
to say.
school
We're in
sports.
high school quarterback territory.
Absolutely. I am fully aware of it. Yes.
But
Oh,
yeah,
man.
South of Midnight available now. I played it on Game Pass. Julian, I believe you were on Game Pass as well, or did you just
Yeah,
pick
Game
it
Pass.
up? Okay. But yeah, potential definitely there, but if I had to be honest, a lot to be desired. But
Yeah.
hopefully, we'll get to see. I guess slight spoilers, Julian. Is there a chance that Hazel can come back after you finish the game?
Yeah, not to like get into it. I think the problem is like I said, it's an origin story.
Right. Okay.
And I feel like the problem is when it comes to origin stories, there's a very specific. You can't really go too much into that exploration of what it actually means to be like this person, because you most of the time will have to be spent learning to be this person, right? Learning to be this weaver. So I feel like if they eventually, hopefully, get the opportunity to make a sequel, then it kind of opens it up to that, where there's that sequel of that exploration of what it actually means to be a weaver and to help people. So yeah, I think foundationally it's open to a sequel. Whether they'll get a sequel, I guess, is a different question.
Fair enough. But yeah, South of Midnight available now. Check it out if that sounds like something you're into. But be warned, might not be all there, but what is there, I think, is okay. I don't want to say for the most part, just because based on our last hour of conversation, I do feel like there are some lows more than highs, but I do appreciate the highs as well. And boys, that was a beefy boy episode on a not so beefy game, but can't end it off without a trip to Don't Match Me Challenge Town. So this is the part of the episode where I guess me this week, Jaren, will bring forth 5 questions, and it is up to you, the listener, and my co-host on this episode to respond and just not match my answer. Where, of course, this is a audio journal, a audio podcast, and if you don't know a particular answer, feel free to pause it, find something up, and pause it once again. Where I'll be honest, I haven't did this speech in a minute, so I'm kind of forgetting all the deets. But
You sound like me.
some jitters, some welcome jitters. But yeah, if you want to play on normal mode, all you have to do is simply don't match me. But if you want a bit more difficult, don't match any of us on this episode. But rewinding the clock to kind of in the beginning when I told you about my weekend, I said that we stood in line for Record Store Day. So, frankly, I'm going to swerve a bit. This won't be a music-based Don't Match Me, but a line-based Don't Match Me. So,
Oh, okay.
A what based?
line. So get ready for my Don't Match Me challenge, line edition. So, question
For
one.
queuing for those in Europe.
Yes.
Got it.
The queue. So, question one. Name something you typically wait in line for. Name something you typically stand in line and wait for.
Is this like, can it be like specific or like?
Whatever that question means to you, Julian,
Oh.
all you have to do is just don't match what I think comes to mind when you say what is to name something you typically stand in line for.
I'm a little bit concerned I'm going to match with Matt here.
So name something you wait in line for in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you said the buffet, you're out.
Ooh.
That was a close one.
Was that a
That
close
was
one? Got whiffed.
Uh-huh.
Matt,
Mm-hmm.
all right, Matt, name something you wait in line for.
You know, I went with something that's very local to us. I went with well, no, this line I mean is very local to us. Ice cream.
I got it. Okay. Without
Ooh.
naming anything, I totally understand what you're referring
There's
to.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a
Okay.
very specific ice cream parlor in our area that you
Yes.
wait in line for, and that is the first line I think of when I think of lines.
Especially when the weather hits like 15 degrees
Mm-hmm.
outside. Yeah, I feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Boys, we went there on opening. Luckily, no
Nice.
line. But as I mentioned a few weeks ago, someone in the parking lot telling us about conspiracy theories. So take that. For
Honestly,
what you
the
will.
best kind of experience is, just listen to weirdos talk.
I prefer to enjoy ice cream without conspiracy theories, but that's just me.
Mhm.
That's just me. But Rakush,
I mean, I like thinking people are weird when I'm eating ice cream,
Fair.
so kind of
fair.
works.
But Rakush, name something you wait in line for.
I went with boarding a plane because as of this recording, it is going to be exactly a year to the date that we flew back from Japan.
good answer.
And I've been very reminiscent of that trip recently.
Good answer.
Nice.
Oh God.
Julian,
I just
name something you wait in line for.
I thought of this because I did it yesterday, but I lined up for pretzels at the Mr. Pretzel.
Oh.
Nice. Oh man, there's a pretzel place near my office in like the shopping center near my office. Sometimes not sometimes. I hit it up one time, and they gave me a
What?
free pretzel because they'd made too many
That's
Oh,
dope.
man.
with like the pretzel bites that I'd eaten. So shout out to the pretzel
Yo,
place.
pretzel-
I'm not gonna name it because
Maybe there's a hot take. I don't know. Pretzel bites way better than just regular pretzels.
Don't know if I can rock with you on that, Julian.
Yeah.
I think I do rock with. I think I rock with Julian on this. I think it's an even split here.
Don't think I can rock with you boys there. Me and Matt, Matt,
Uh-huh.
Let's put a pin in this for the next episode because I feel like we need to talk about it.
Pretzel
Pretzel
all
bites.
together.
I'm just,
Next episode, Matt. Next episode. Jared's got to go
we
somewhere.
need to all get pretzels and then also get a order of ices. Not sponsored, by the way. Okay,
I'd be
Question
sponsored by
two.
pretzels.
I'd be sponsored by ices if given the chance. You know what? I'd be sponsored regardless. Okay, question 2.
Mhm.
Name something you would sign your name on a dotted line. So essentially, name a document that you would sign your name on a line. You're presented a document, there's a line that says sign here. What are you signing?
Uh-huh. And there has to be a line where things are getting signed.
Yes.
Okay, so that takes out one of my answers.
So name something you would sign your name on a line in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boys, I went with an NDA.
Ooh.
I've signed plenty of those in the past, but if you said sign your name on a NDA, you're out.
Mm.
Not
Jaren, I was going to ask you if you're in trouble, but you clearly cannot tell us
No.
because you signed the NDA. so.
Yeah.
Matt.
Mhm.
What are you signing?
When you specified specifically a line, I had to change my answer. Because initially, I was thinking of just signing inside the box for taxes. But
Mhm.
when you say a line specifically, for some reason, the first one that came up in my head is a permission form for a field trip.
Ooh, good answer. Good answer.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Okay, Rakush, what are you signing?
I'm going to go with the checkbook.
Mm.
Ooh. Yeah.
Have you signed a check recently?
I mean, those government checks that come in, you got to sign
Fair.
them. So yeah.
Mm.
Fair. Okay, Julian?
Because I don't have direct deposit
Yeah.
still. I thought I did,
What?
but I don't.
You should look into that.
Yeah.
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 Julian, what are you signing?
Matching Matt, and because of my profession, I thought of report cards.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Match, but kind of a match, but not really a match.
Mhm.
So you're good. Okay.
I was gonna say yearbooks.
Are
There's
there
no
lines?
line.
Oh, no lines though.
The
That's why I didn't
Unless
go with
you
it
make a
because
line.
like there's
Yeah.
no line.
That's true.
Yeah.
the only line is like the
well,
crack.
technically, like
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Yeah.
some autographs, like people draw the line.
Okay. Question 3. So boys, we're at the convenience store because we're getting ready to go get pretzels, but we have to fuel ourselves. So name something you typically can impulse buy while standing in line. So
Oh, that's easy. I got the
you're
answer
standing in
already.
line, name something you can typically impulse buy while standing in line.
Like all while in line.
I
Okay.
literally
Yep.
did that yesterday.
So we're
Yeah.
waiting to get checked out. Our eyes are wandering. What's
Mhm.
something that we can impulse buy or pick up when waiting in line? So name something that I guess impulse buy is too harsh, but name something you can buy or get, put in your cart, put in your haul on impulse. But yeah, name something you can impulse buy while standing in line in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boys,
Hmm.
I went really specific here, so hopefully no one matched me. I went with a Hot Wheels car, which I have done
Whoa,
in
what?
the past.
Stop
What?
it.
Interesting one.
You-
What?
What
were-
lines are you in where there's a Hot Wheels car?
Is that a GameStop?
I was at a grocery chain where, when waiting in a kind of longer line, because that was a line you could only buy alcohol in, there was a kind of, a bin full of Hot Wheels cars, and I looked inside, and there was a Godzilla Skyline for $2, and I thought, hey, I like Skylines.
Oh, man.
My Lance Queen Eofi likes Godzilla, so I have to.
Oh man, that was a wild impulse buy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I don't think
Uh-huh.
anyone's
I'd be more
matching
impressed if someone did match
Yeah.
you.
you. Yeah.
All right, Matt,
Uh-huh.
what are you impulse buying while standing in line?
I mean, I just went with gum, like just bog standard gum.
Fair.
Mhm.
Fair enough. Rikush?
I went with the lottery ticket.
Hmm.
I hope I win one soon.
Good answer. Good answer. And finally, Julian?
I went with S tier candy nerds gummy clusters.
Oh man,
Oh, specific.
Yo, yes.
Good
Those
yes.
things those
Yes.
things are too dangerous.
They're so dangerous.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Because like before you know it, you're like,
just ate
okay,
the whole
half the
bag.
bag is
Yeah.
done. So you might as well finish the remaining half because you don't want to leave an open bag of candy
Yep.
around,
Uh-huh.
right? It's dangerous, man. It's
Oh man.
All right. Question 4. Actually, I'm going to make my question 5 my question 4 and then switch them around. So this might be unfair to Julian and Matt, and I think Rikush, you might have the advantage here, but name a line you find in sports. So name any sports line.
What?
Hmm.
Oh, okay.
A sports line? Like
Okay,
a
okay,
line
okay,
you would
okay,
find on
yep.
like a sports thing?
Whether it be in any sport, there can be
Yeah.
some sort of line. I don't want to give potential answers, but
Same. Any line referred to, or any line that you can see on like anything, like a floor, like whatever.
Okay, so it doesn't have to have the word line in it, as long as it's like
yeah, I guess so. But
I
typically,
As long as it's a line, yeah, I'm
in
sure it'll
sports.
have line in
okay,
it.
I guess.
so name any line in sports in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boys, I went with the free throw line in basketball.
Mm.
That's a good one. That's all reliable.
Matt,
Mhm.
what line in sports are you? What sports are you looking at?
I went with the blue defensive zone marking lines in hockey.
Okay,
Oh wow.
Rikush,
Yeah.
is there a
Good pull.
Yeah, that's the offensive
Okay.
zone.
I mean,
line.
that's
Yeah.
the
Alright.
that's the
'Cause
line
that-
where I
if you cross it before the puck, yeah, it's right. Because if you cross that line before the puck crosses the line, that's the offside line.
Yeah.
So yes,
I'm I'm not talking about the one behind the net. I'm talking about the one that's kind of 3.
I know.
Okay.
No,
yeah.
no, that's icing.
Right.
You're thinking icing. I'm talking about offsides.
Rikush, I'm going to
Yes.
say for you for last because there's one line I'm thinking in particular that if you say, I'm going to be happy, and if you don't say it, I'm going to be extremely mad at you. So,
I mean,
Julian,
too much pressure,
name
though.
a sports line.
I literally only knew 2 lines, so this
Yeah.
was a 50-50. The the one that I knew was the free throw line, but I went with touchdown line. I don't know if that actually exists.
I'll
Touch-
allow this. You know what? I will
touchdown.
allow this because you have to cross a line to get the touchdown in the end zone. The end zone.
What
line
is
was
what
called.
is the actual line called?
I think it's just the end zone.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It would just be like the 0-yard line, technically, wouldn't it?
Okay.
I can't remember honestly. Like that one kind of stumps me a little bit because I always call it just the
Whatever
end
that
zone.
line is.
Yeah.
When you said 2 lines, Julian, and you said free throw, I thought you were gonna go with the 3-point line,
Oh.
but
Oh
which
no.
is also
I-
a valid line.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Now I'm trying to match Jaren because he said that there's a line that he wants me to specifically say here.
All right. So Rakush, as the resident sportsman,
Uh-huh.
what line are you saying?
Okay, which one do you think I'm gonna say here?
Say your answer, then I'll say what I
Okay.
hoped you would say.
I'm gonna go with the foul line in baseball.
Fair.
No, foul.
As a baseball
foul,
fan.
Jaren, not fair.
But yep. You know what, Rakush? I hoped you were gonna say you're the TNA line when TNA wrestlers would cross the line.
okay.
But
No, that's
alas,
too deep a cut, dude. That is, yeah.
I guess we aren't wrestling kin after all.
I'm sorry, brother.
But
Is there a line for the trampoline line in that basketball where it's-
Slam ball?
slam
Oh,
ball.
God.
Oh, man.
I don't know. Maybe the midcourt line, the jump ball line. But that's a spot.
Okay. So final answer, which might be unfair, or if you can get creative, might not be. But for my final line-based don't match me question, name something. Name either a tool or you know what? Just name something that can help you draw a straight line.
Oh God.
Name something that can
Oh.
help you draw a straight line.
It has to be a straight line. It cannot just be any line.
You know what? Fine. Let's say name something that can help you draw a line.
Okay.
So name something that can help you draw a line in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Speaking about being in grade school, boys, in a pinch, when I didn't have a ruler, I went with my trusty protractor.
That's a good one.
Ooh, nice.
Mm.
Yeah. Solid.
All right, Matt, what are you using to help you draw a line?
Jaren, I'll be honest. I think I'm out because I would have also said ruler. But when you said great creative about it, there was like 2 specific ones that came into my head. One, technically, a pencil. And the other is
Fair.
the shift key.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what
Ooh.
you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's a good one.
Nice,
Oh.
nice. Rakush, what are you using to draw a line?
I'm going with my foot
What?
because that's what you use to draw the line in the sand.
Okay, it's like a pencil style
Ooh,
answer.
good answer.
Okay.
That's a good answer.
Good.
That's a good answer. Okay. Julian, what are you using to draw a line?
Oh, I have a pretty basic answer compared to everyone. I-
bet.
I initially thought like the edge of like the agenda.
Oh, that's a good one.
Also
That's a
in
good
the
one.
pinch.
Listen,
Also in the pinch.
listen, that was all reliable.
Yeah, and I thought that was an obvious one, so I just went with the compass with like the pointy thing because I was like, I used to poke things a lot
Mm.
with that in school.
Man.
Oh man, can't
Honestly,
wait. Sorry, go on, Matt.
No, I just imagine, like, I want to say elementary school cruise, but honestly, I imagined you as, like, a college student with, like, your foot on a desk on a piece of paper and you, like, running, like, a pen along
Oh,
it or
like
something.
using my toes to hold a pen. Nah, that's listen, that's OnlyFans kind of stuff. I'm
Yep.
not
Yeah, I was
necessarily.
gonna say that's for the Patreon.
Yeah, that's for the
subscribers.
Patreon. Yes.
Uh-huh. Oh, man.
But boys, I can't wait for speaking about trauma, our grade school trauma vault episode, which
Mm.
based on today's discussions will probably come sooner rather than later. But boys,
Mhm.
thank you for indulging me not only in my journal about how I'm not sure how to make friends as an adult, but also South of Midnight and of course the Don't Match Me challenge. So with that, our Beefy Boy episode has come to a close. As always, I would like to thank my best friend Matt Alba for joining me this week and also editing this podcast.
Thanks, man. And, as always, I want to thank you for hosting this podcast and, jamming with Julian on a very, very beefy boy episode.
Matt, I want to thank you for just coming along for the ride.
I was here.
Also, want to thank our pal Rakush, another one of my best friends, for joining us this week. And also, you know what? Calling us out for potentially being too cautious about our South of Midnight talks.
Jaren, bro, who needs new friends when when we already got good friends, best friends, some might say, like you guys.
Fair enough. Fair enough from our West Side Fun. And of course, gotta thank the professor, who might not necessarily be a professor anymore, and Julian for joining us this week. And of course, bringing the hard, thought-provoking thoughts of South of Midnight.
Yeah, for sure. No,
I'm now picturing you drawing a line with an agenda as a professor, and that is a way funnier visual than like, you guys in elementary school.
Just like on like the whiteboard.
Yeah,
It's still that agenda that has like the holographic cover.
Man.
Like, does anyone remember that one? Yeah.
Wait, hang on. You're saying still? Do they not make those anymore? Or I guess
No,
they... Oh, man.
that was like in the 90s when there was abundance. Now there is none.
No.
We're losing recipes.
An abundance of hollow technology.
Yeah. A rad hollow technology.
Oh man.
But yeah, so we wrap South Midnight next week. But I guess just to give some previews, we'll have a Blueprints episode coming soon. Rakush has been watching some spring season anime, so expect some thoughts on that. And yeah, we have some Beefy Boy releases coming out soon, so hopefully we'll get to those. And if you aren't checking out our Fantasy Critic just league, you can find that by searching up the real Mistake Zone League on Fantasy Critic. Rakush, had to take out Robot Rakush and finally made some moves by bidding on some games. Counterpicking my Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4.
Sorry about that.
And also, I believe Mark dropped a bid for Little Nightmares 3. So yeah, our league's still fully kicking. And of course, I see some...
Oh.
What's up, Matt?
Sorry, you guys, I just remembered. This is episode number 69.
Hey!
Oh,
season
nice.
Finale?
Yes, this is definitely the season finale episode. So
Oh, shit.
I like how last season's episode 69 finale was me honestly having a meltdown over how much Persona 5 makes me angry. Speaking about trauma. And now we're talking about the traumatic aspects, or at least the lightly traumatic aspects of South of Midnight. So I think it's fitting. Where, boys, I think we have another 69 episodes to figure out what else we'll deep dive into. But that's a problem for next season. But until then, Matt, please take it away.
This has been the Mistake Zone, and we're all out of techniques for making new friends.
It's so hard, you guys. It's so hard.